Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about this massive unification fight at welterweight between Errol Spence and Yordenis UGAS, with the winner hopefully fighting Terence Crawford for the undisputed title. The trainer of Spence, Derek James, has said that this is the plan. He said it would be pointless to fight Bud Crawford prior to this because it's a sort of fight that deserves all the belts to be on the line. Let's all hope that they all keep their word to this and we get to see one of the biggest fights in boxing if Errol Spence is to come through it. If he doesn't and UGAS wins, well then UGAS Crawford would be one of the biggest fights in boxing. So how is this fight going to go? Let's get technical. Let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of both guys, where they can potentially capitalize on the other one's weaknesses, and then we'll come up with a prediction towards the end of the video. We'll start off with Yordenis UGAS. This is a guy who requires you to come into the pocket and be at mid-range really, or close range in the pocket. You can see here when Pacquiao was coming inside and not exiting the pocket, this is where UGAS was having the success. You see how he likes to bend forward there to try and hide the body as well, UGAS. He's quite flat-footed sometimes and it makes him a little bit immobile, but this is why he wants you in his wheelhouse. And when you are coming in the way Pacquiao was and you're not exiting that pocket as quickly as possible, you're leaving UGAS the opportunity to then punch with you, to time you on the way in. In many regards, he operates in a similar way to Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia, of course, did fight Errol Spence. He's that counter puncher too. He looks for those 1-2s or individual even pot shot encounters as he looks to time you on the way in. But the difference is Danny can be lighter on his feet. UGAS is heavier on his feet, but he's also the bigger and physically stronger man. And he hides his body a lot better than Danny Garcia. So I'm not saying they're clones of each other here, but there are elements to their game which are quite similar. And you can see Pacquiao's not coming in and stepping out, is he? He's staying in the pocket. And that wide right hand there that he loves to throw UGAS, we're going to touch on that later as well with regards to Errol Spence. But you can also see another thing with UGAS is that he's a sort of guy who, while he can be hit, he does like to cover up as you start your attack. When you're starting your attack, he likes to often cover up and then go after you. He's not necessarily looking to slip past the shot and then counter you in that way or have a pullback counter or something like that. He will often cover up, take what you want to give, basically. Make sure he's not hurt with anything big, not eating anything too flush, and then land with you. That's how he operates. That's the sort of work he does. He trusts in his own physical attributes, and he is obviously physically strong. Now, what I want to do is show you some of the highlights of him fighting Amir Imam. Amir Imam is much more athletic than Errol Spence, and we'll touch on that later. He's not as methodically driven, and he's not as technically gifted as Errol Spence, and we'll talk about that later. But what Imam was able to do against UGAS is basically just take away that pocket, use his length, use that movement, straight shots, getting outside. You see how UGAS there went for the counter uppercut, but Imam was able to pull out and get out of the way. And sometimes when he was in the pocket, he'd start rotating his body inside and then getting out quickly after that, pivoting out. So he's basically just looking to get UGAS to reset, punch at range, pull out quickly, as you saw there, quick jab to the body before pulling out quickly and stopping UGAS. There it is again, attempted counter that misses, stopping UGAS from being able to counter him, land flush and be able to hurt him, to impose his physical strengths. This is what Imam was able to do, and this is something that Errol Spence is going to want to look at as well, but he's going to want to do it in a different manner because, like I said, he's not as athletically gifted as Amir Imam. He's not as fast as him. I don't think he's as tall either. He's certainly not as tall. I don't think he has his length, but he's not, like I said, as explosive of an athlete. And this is not something that I'm just saying. Derek James has been saying this more recently, and we'll talk about that too later on in the video. But can you see how UGAS is now trying to walk him down, trying to lure him in? But you can see he's not really the sort of guy that cuts off the ring particularly well. You see that? He's not typically Cuban either, where he's light on his feet. So he's very much a case of, look, I'm going to be here, I'm going to try and keep tight, and I'm going to wait for you to come inside if possible. Even if I have to follow you around the ring, I'm going to hope to edge into an area where you're going to throw so I can then slip or preferably cover up and throw a big shot of my own. And what you can see here with Errol Spence is his ability to apply great foot pressure and still maintain that distance. You see that little feint there with the jab and another feint and another feint. So what happens is when you're someone like Danny Garcia or UGAS, you're not sure. Is he coming in or is he not? See how quickly he stepped out there? And I want you to watch it again here. Watch how he throws the jab and then steps out, Then another time and he steps out again. Ready? Watch this. Look how concerned he is with maintaining his range. You see how he was covering his head there very, very well with his arms and his shoulders, covering the sides of his head, the side of his head, these temples. Look how high that guard is. He uses the shoulder to tuck the chin behind too. So he doesn't offer you a lot to aim at. You can aim at his body, but because he is so aware of distance, you'll see when Danny tries to shoot a right hand to the body, you'll see that Spence will be ready to step back. Ready? You watching this? So he lands a right hand there to the face, but then there to the body, yeah, he lands something. But Spence is very, very aware of any little tell that Danny's going to give that he's going to throw back. And then he's ready to step back and take a lot off of that. And so you're throwing these hard punches trying to affect him. They're not really landing flush. And look how straight the jab is as well. So it's hard to read. It's off the beat. He didn't throw it necessarily as he stamped his foot. There was a slight pause. Look how it comes straight from the guard there. You see that? So it's very, very hard to read. Your brain doesn't register as quickly when something's coming straight at you in a direct line. This is why cars, I've said this before, have brake lights on them. If they're going to emergency brake, your brain needs something else apart from the change in the movement of the object in front of you to let you know that that change is occurring. And you can see how there he was stepping into that backhand on 2 occasions because he's getting you guessing. Is he feinting and he's just going to step out? And if so, and I have to punch with him, that's a sort of technique that Alexander Usyk uses as well, by the way. Feinting his way in, makes you throw these shots, you load up on those shots, it gets you tired because you're not landing flush. You might be nicking him and on occasion you are going to land, and we'll get to that later. But generally speaking, you're not landing flush. And in an exchange where you do flush, but you do land flush, often he's so good at covering up that face. Look at the way he raises that shoulder every single time he throws a jab, even if it is straight or indeed a hook. And I'll show you a still shot in a moment where I can show you how he uses that shoulder almost like a shield. But he's very aware of protecting himself. He's very defensively responsible, even though he's very methodical about how he goes about trying to break you down and put you under incessant pressure. And he's got a very consistent jab, as you can see, with great technique. Again, you can see it here. Look at the shoulders. I want you to focus on the shoulders and how they're coming up by the side of the chin. Even when it's a hook, not necessarily just a straight shot, he comes up and he has his thumb facing downwards, which is not really a technique that I necessarily like that much. I prefer the thumb facing the ceiling for a hook for various reasons that I've spoken about in the past on this particular channel. But when you do have your thumb facing downwards, one thing it does do quite often is enable you to throw it from a sort of higher arc, and that enables you to again get your shoulder right next to your chin. You're protecting your jaw. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. He's very defensively responsible, very hard to read. Everything about him is methodical. There are no special effects, as Floyd Mayweather would say. And Derek James has actually spoken about this as well. I was watching Hatman's video, which was absolutely fantastic on this issue, by the way. You should definitely check it out, where he was talking about how he was basically discussing the athleticism of Errol Spence in comparison to Terence Crawford. And he was saying he's not the most athletic guy in the world. And this is something that was confirmed by Derek James, his own trainer. Derek James, Hatman was explaining, had said that he's not particularly athletic. He's a little bit boring as well in his style. He describes him as boring because it's methodical, basically. There's no Roy Jones-esque type of explosion here. There's no flashiness to what Errol Spence does. Everything is very, very technically astute, however. And this is the point that Derek James makes. He explains that a lot of guys in this day and age are basically athletes and they've forgotten some of the old ways, so to speak. Now, I'm not necessarily a believer in those things. I don't believe that boxing has declined in any way. I do believe that athletes evolve. I do believe they have the opportunity to learn from great fighters of the past and so on and so forth. So I don't believe that the athletes have somehow devolved or anything like that. However, he is certainly a bit of a throwback when it comes to the focus on technique. And I want you to look at that still shot right there. You see how that right shoulder, he's throwing the hook. Look at his guard here. The right shoulder is protecting his jaw and his chin, and the left hand is protecting the side of his face. Now, he's potentially open to the body here. If you do come underneath that hook, you're able to potentially target the body. But to the head, he's always very, very defensively astute. Now, with regards to Derek James, talking about his lack of athleticism, it's not that he's slow per se, but there are more athletic guys. And as a result of that, when he is looking to pull out, as I showed you before, sometimes he can get caught. We do see examples of him getting countered. You know, Danny Garcia was able to do it. You saw Kell Brook able to do it quite consistently, particularly early in their fight. You see here 2 big right-hand counters. He's not able to pull back quickly enough there. He tries to use his hands to usher Garcia away, and he largely steps away from that second right hand, but the first one landed. And again there, so on occasion there, he commits too much, and while he lands his own shot, he gets caught with a little left hook, another straight right hand down the pipe, and another one there which made him bounce a little bit. So Ugas will be looking to throw that sort of shot against him. With Kell Brook, Kell was winning the fight early on. He was countering with a jab over the top of Errol Spence's jab, and he was actually setting a trap for it. He'd throw a throwaway jab that Spence was trying to often counter, and then Brook would come over the top of it. And it was quite a significant difference, in my humble opinion, early on in their athletic abilities. You could see that Brook was the better athlete, and he was winning the fight, and you're thinking, oh, you know, this hyped up American prospect called The Truth is, you know, suffering at the hands of the special one here. But what you also saw was an adjustment from him, and we'll come to that in a moment. But one thing you have to also remember is that Ugas does not have the height advantage that he has over the likes of Pacquiao or Porter. So this thing of where he wants to hold his feet, wait for you to come in, and then as you're pulling out to reach in and land on you, he may not have that advantage here because he has a 3-inch shorter reach than Errol Spence. So Errol might not have to commit in the same way that those guys were doing. And I showed you the way that Pacquiao wasn't stepping out of the pocket, and neither was Porter as quickly, because Porter was looking to come inside and impose himself, because that's how he fights, and Pacquiao's legs just weren't the same anymore. Well, that's the difference here, that perhaps Errol Spence will be able to mess with the range, as I showed you, a lot more effectively. And you can see here he does have the ability to adjust. So when he was getting done, athletically speaking, against Kell Brook, look how he starts to come underneath the attempted counter jab from Brook. You see it slow motion here. He throws the jab, and he knows that counter jab's coming. He comes underneath and starts to shoot hooks into the body, shovel hooks into the body. Now, don't get me wrong, Kell Brook goes on to adjust and start to defend against those shots too. But the point is that he is a thinking fighter. What I want you to see in this final clip here is that Ugas is a very physically strong man. I mean, Sean Porter tends to bully everyone in this weight category. This is the one person physically he was not able to do that to. Crawford too, who's very, very strong. But with Crawford, it was more a case of him having great distance control with step backs and power shots. Whereas with Porter, he was literally ragdolled at times. You can see the physical strength here. And listen, if he's not able to compete, I guess you could say, from a technical perspective with Spence, as Spence begins to slow down later on in the fight, if they start coming together, he's going to have to start using this physical strength, push him about, tie him up a little bit. Look at the way he just shrugs him off. And he landed a few cute shots on the inside there as well, and just he throws him to the floor. A bit of a trip there as well. He swept him a little bit. But the point is that he's a very physically strong man. So although he may not have the height and advantage and reach advantage that he had against Porter and Pacquiao, what he's going to have to do is perhaps get a bit more hands-on. You know, if Spence is not going to be exiting the pocket as he begins to slow down slightly and hold his feet a little bit more as the fight wears on, he should look to try and get on him and impose himself, because Spence is a guy that likes to fight on the inside. He's very good on the inside. So it'll be interesting to see against perhaps a physically stronger man how Spence will cope. So how do I think this fight will go? I believe that Errol Spence, in those moments where they're not engaging in exchanges, will be able, with a lot of distance control and with that really good straight jab, to win the quieter moments. So when they're exchanging, I think it will be competitive. I think Ugas does have a very nice counter. If Spence stays in the pocket, he could be losing a lot of those exchanges. If Ugas likes to come inside and start to get hands-on and break his construct by literally pushing him and pulling him around, he could have success there in that regard, physically speaking. Well, that's not typically his game. What he wants to do is hold his feet, time you on your way in, land some big shots to the body, land a right hook to the head, and really impose himself in that way. But ultimately, because he's a guy that waits on you to do the work, and Spence is more than capable of taking away that pocket and getting behind that consistent jab, even if Ugas is looking for the odd counter pot shot, I expect that Spence will be the one winning those slower moments and so racking up the rounds. As he begins to slow down, I believe Ugas's physical strength will begin to tell. But because he doesn't have the same height and reach advantage, I believe that Spence, as long as he can prevent himself from getting seriously hurt, and there are question marks about his psychology, again, going back to Hatman's video, Hatman was explaining how in an interview Errol Spence was talking about how he had had various flashbacks following his terrible car accident. You have to ask question marks around that. You know, what is occurring in the mind of Errol Spence? Other people have said that he's been talking already about retiring one day and saying, you know, one day his body's not going to work in the same way, and he is looking to unify all the belts with Terence Crawford. Does this mean that mentally he's starting to think about the end? He's also got a retina problem, and that is a very serious issue potentially. Is Ugas going to be able to target the eye? We've shown you that Spence covers up very well and protects that head very well, but if Ugas can find a big shot in the eye, we know that they can be quite serious injuries in the middle of a boxing match. So Ugas is a live dog, there's no doubt about it. But Errol Spence also has the ability to adjust, as I showed you in this video with Kell Brook. Something I didn't show you in this video with Kell Brook is against Danny Garcia, there were moments where he was coming inside and basically trying to tie up the left hand almost. He was trying to lean on that left hand, and it was almost as though, or at least be in line with it and getting up close with it to stop a potential left hook counter. So he knows what he's doing in there. He knows how to take away the strengths of an opponent. He's a very methodical guy who looks to break down a guy. We've seen Ugas hurt as well in exchanges against the likes of Ramos, for instance. So I don't think he's got the iron chin. This is why I think he covers up in the way he does and hides the body by bending forward. I think he uses his hands to protect himself because maybe he's not quite as durable as a lot of guys might think. So I wouldn't be stunned if Spence was to hurt him and break him down, but I think the most likely outcome is Errol Spence to win the fight on points. And another thing, this fight's in Texas, the hometown of Errol Spence, and Texas is notoriously bad for hometown decisions. So even if it's even remotely close and you think that Ugas edged it, do you really think he's going to get the decision? So I think the smart money here is on Errol Spence to win the fight. Let me know what you think, guys. Hopefully it's a terrific fight. If you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button with an Errol Spence jab. Hit the notifications button with a Yordenis UGAS counter shot. And hit the subscribe button, of course, if you haven't already, with a Chris Andre special or an elbow drop from the top rope. Why not? We can go WWE on here. Doesn't always have to be boxing. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.